Cool. Right. Oh, you can all hear me. Excellent. I've been sitting in this audience, kind of looking up at these things and imagining the Muppets all judging us while we're up here. So that's kind of what's going on in the back of my head at the moment. So I'm going to be talking about mobile debugging. And I'm pretty proud of my abstract for this talk, because I managed to fit it into a tweet and send it to PPK. And basically, mobile debugging and debugging generally is a bitch, right? And with mobile phones, they're these black holes that we can't actually get into, and it makes it hard. But for me, it's the most challenging piece of work. I love debugging. It's where all the interesting things happen. It's where all the puzzle solving happens. Now, I worked for a company for 10 years before I started on my own. And I used to be a manager, and back in 2000, people would join the company, and the first thing that they would have to do is go on to bug fixing for 3 months. And they took this as some kind of punishment. They're like, oh, you convinced me to join your company now, and now you're putting me on bugs. But at the end of the 3 months, they then go on to features. And they actually got to kind of love that piece of work, because they go and have, they're given a puzzle, and they solve it, and they move on to the next puzzle, and the next puzzle, and so on and so forth. And for me, like IE6, when I was working with it, it's the challenging piece of work. If all my code worked first time, it'd be boring, right? IE6, I sweat blood and tears trying to get this thing to work. And then when I succeed, it's like it's a victory over IE6. And this is the mobile debugging brings that fresh new IE6 for me in a way. So that's what I'm excited about. I did actually manage to find my first mobile website. This is the company I worked for. They got bought, and they got bought again, and somehow the website is still up. And this is just like some tiny, tiny little version of their site. And we were testing on 7110s, and we finally got onto the internet with phones. And writing these websites, I mean, I'm pretty lazy, so I didn't bother reading any specs. I was like, oh, it's XML, it's HTML, I can just write it, it'll work. It's really hard to debug this if you don't bother reading the specs. You get a lot of this, like broken XML, and your page doesn't render, and apparently I had to put ampersands in there, who knew? And actually, this doesn't even work beyond the home page, because all the gateways that you have to connect WAP through, they don't exist anymore. They don't work properly. So even this was broken. But I didn't want to go debugging this. I couldn't be bothered. We're in a new era of mobile development, and the smartphone is where we want to be debugging, basically. So I don't want to patronize developers who kind of got debugging licked, but this is how I look at debugging. So the most important part is actually being able to replicate that entire environment so that I can see the bug happening for the first time. The amount of times I've heard developers go, it works for me. Yeah, it works for you. They didn't call you up and say they were lying. They're calling you up and making up a bug just to keep you on your toes. So replicating it in its complete environment is the first trick. Then isolating it down, and then you can basically kill your bug, right? And in a way, web debugging is actually quite simple in some respects. I mean, compared to like C or C++, where you'll have memory pointers kind of disappearing and bits of data floating off and things just exploding. And all we have to do is replicate that same environment, and the bug will present itself to us. Then we have to go hunting for it somehow. So really, one of the biggest jobs is the replicating part, and this is what part of this talk will talk about, and getting close to that code. So the three things I'm trying to cover, or want to cover, are knowing the environment, knowing my enemy, knowing the actual device, and they're all different. Well, they're all different, and then there's different pieces of hardware with the same software, so they're different as well. Getting kind of inside there and being able to get an understanding of what's going on. Closing the gap. So when I was debugging my 7110 Nokia phone, I was writing code, releasing to some server, refreshing the browser on the phone, and finding it still didn't work because I still hadn't read the specs right. And then going back to my code and uploading again. And so I want to debug on this like a desktop PC, and I want it to affect the actual phone. That's what I mean by closing the gap. And the last thing is to expect the unexpected. It works for me and it doesn't work for them. trying to have some clues, and I'm going to share a couple of stories that I would have thought something that the bug should have presented itself to me, but didn't because of this completely bizarre environment. So, getting to know my enemy. Not quite sure this fits, but this is an Art of War quote. I haven't read the book either, so I don't even know what the Chinese across says. But the point being is, if you know your enemy and you know how to use your tools, then you should be able to solve every single problem, right? So, first things first. Hopefully, if you're doing any mobile development at all, maybe you fired up a simulator, and you can get quite a few of these for free. You can get all of them for free, right? Someone told me off for saying I had to pay for a developer license to get iOS, but you just have to pay £1,000 for a laptop, a Mac, and then you can get the simulator. But don't rely on them, please don't. Like, use it as a starting point. Use your desktop as a starting point. Code on the desktop, get it working in this, have a look at it in the simulator, and get to the actual devices. The devices are going to be different to the simulators. Even Safari's browser, which is supposed to be, the ultimate mobile browsing experience, is still not the same as the actual device. So, one of the things that's been talked about in this conference is actually getting hold of real devices, and some people have already had real devices. You want to get your hands on real devices. My slides will be online later on, and Brad Frost has got a blog post about where to get those devices, and it also includes a list of devices I hadn't thought of, and get them from eBay and so on. Get free devices. There are vendors here that want to give you devices. They're not going to be able to give every single developer a device, but like I've got 6 phones with me. My phone is my iPhone. I'm not gonna. That's my own personal phone for business. Vendors need to give me their devices so that I can build apps for their phones, so people can use those apps on their phones or the tablets or whatever it is. So, like Microsoft and BlackBerry and Nokia, just ask them for the devices. And I know that BlackBerry are actually doing a pretty good job of giving them as many ways as possible. But the big thing that I actually got from PPK's talk and a couple of other talks is share the devices. Jeremy's got opened up his office his office at Clear Left, which is local to me, which means that I can take my phones and leave them at their office and make it like an open community of a testing lab. This is the easiest way of getting your hands on real devices. Find people that are local to you and just start sharing all those devices and have them in one place. I don't care. These are business phones. I don't care if they fall on the floor, get scratched. It doesn't bother me. We just replace them. And like PPK said, I mean, it doesn't matter that they're $300 or whatever. It's just a business expense. It should be nothing. It's something that the client will incur if they want you to support a particular piece of hardware. They're paying for your services, and that's part of the testing process. So get the actual real devices. Well, I saw a talk a couple of weeks ago where the speaker said that they had an iPhone, an iPad, and the rest they do on simulators. You can't tell the client that it works on Android, like you're absolutely certain it works on this phone, if you've not actually seen it on the device. Or I can't bring myself to do that. I can't commit that promise. So when I do actually get these devices in my hands, the very first thing I do is open up a JavaScript console and look at the window object. Okay, so I wrote a tool called JS Console by accident. I realized that I've taken just a JavaScript console and gotten rid of the Chrome, but for me, being able to get like a Windows phone, going straight to JS Console, putting in this or window, hit enter, and then just scroll through the object. Have a look at what properties are there. That's how I know that the iPhone has WebGL, all the WebGL methods on it, and none of them work, because I saw them, I was like, superb, right. Oh, nothing works. But it gives me an idea of actually what's on the device and what functions I can call. Have some kind of understanding of the device capability, the performance of the device. Because, another project I was working on, we had some kind of arcane Nokia phone that we had to support. And the client was saying, it's really sluggish for me. And that's not actually anything I can debug, right? Some sluggish. Can you get a bit more specific? But the actual hardware wasn't able to do what we were trying to do, and he was getting stuck, and I think, anyway, the point being is I have some understanding of what the device is capable of. For instance, the iPad 3. It's the same hardware, or it's the same GPU as the iPad 2, but it has twice the amount of like pixel density, which means that when you're coming to do kind of full screen graphics rendering, it's not going to be as quick as the iPad 2 because the iPad 2 has less pixels to render. And just as there was a Stanford, just as an aside, there was a Stanford University paper on battery performance on mobile phones and mobile websites, and they measured a whole bunch of websites, and I mean, the paper, I didn't read it, I kind of skimmed the pretty bits, and this is what I found, right? Gmail, and the amount of CSS and JavaScript in HTML, and Wikipedia, and the kind of stripy block, that's the amount of JavaScript. Wikipedia has that much more JavaScript than Gmail? That's not the case, but what Gmail were doing, and I don't know if I would guess that what the Google team were doing, I would guess that they didn't know that they would incur this performance boost and actually make the phone last longer because it didn't affect the battery. It wasn't running all the JavaScript up front. They're basically lazy loading in their JavaScript later on in the application's lifetime, whereas Wikipedia must be delivering all the JavaScript and parsing it all up front. They do this beautiful little hack. I'm not going to go into detail about it, but understanding the performance on the actual device will benefit you in the things like turning on geolocation, nuking the GPS, and killing the battery, and so on. Right. In the next section, I'm going to show you debugging tools for the actual mobile phones and kind of web inspector like dev tools for the phones, and JavaScript execution and console logging, which gets us pretty close. But I've been finding that the next black hole is actually the network request. Understanding what the phone has actually gone and requested, what it still has an open connection to. And that information's not normally available. We were testing a Windows phone. We were testing a whole bunch of phones, but we had a Windows phone that wasn't doing what it needed to do. We were trying to do long polling, and we couldn't work out whether or not there was a JavaScript error, or if it hadn't established a connection, or if the connection was still hanging. So there are these two tools. One's called Charles, which is $50, but it works on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And one's called Fiddler, which is free. You probably don't want to Google Fiddler, but it's free for Windows. And they both do the same thing. They're basically network, they're proxies. So I point my mobile phone to the proxy. So I run Charles on my machine. My phone's on the Wi-Fi. I point my phone to Charles, the proxy, so port 8888. And when I make a web request, it all gets logged. So I can actually see that it's maintaining this long polling connection, or it's requested everything it needed to do. Now, the only problem with this that I kind of saw is that, well, yeah, the problem with this is that I'm now going over a Wi-Fi connection, which is not the same as actually, having the device in my hand and connecting over a 3G connection. So one way around that is you could tether your laptop to your phone and then use your test device to connect via Charles and out through that tethered device. And you then create the full environment of a slower connection and over 3G, and you get the network logging. I haven't tried that yet. I just figured I could do that, right? And make test projects for your cases for your project, but up front, just to test capability. So to get an understanding of what the phone can really do, I've got HTML5 demos is a website I've got that just has like a green light of all the technology it supports. But things like the modernizer test is a better example, and there's other kind of HTML kind of ranking pages that you just take the phone to and have a look and have an understanding of what it has in the first place. Okay, so I want to show you how I get closer to the actual phone with debugging. The plan is to do some live coding. I was going to borrow the rig that I've instantly forgotten the name of now. So I'm going to try and have my phone appear on my desktop, and it'll be fine. The very, very first thing is get your phone talking to that machine, talking to your computer. Don't do what I was doing with my Nokia, which is going up online and then visiting a website. And you want to minimize the point from save to refresh. Okay, You don't want to try and avoid build processes up front, and yeah. So the first thing you want to do is find out your local IP address. It's probably going to be Wi-Fi. Well, actually, it could be Ethernet. As long as you've got the IP address of this machine that you're working from, point your phone to it. I was working with the BBC a couple of weeks ago, and they've got virtual machines on their PCs. So they run their entire environment inside a virtual machine, which means that they can't, if they point their phones to their desktops, it doesn't actually hit their web servers. They need to go into the actual virtual machines because they have this kind of replicated environment. So what you need to do is then tunnel from that virtual machine outwards. There's a tool that I use called Local Tunnel, which is open source as well. So what they could do is pull the whole thing down, host it locally, and tunnel from inside the local, the sandbox, the virtual machine, out onto their machines, and have the mobile phones get into those web pages. So the next thing that I want is JavaScript debugging tools. Here is, our savior, the iPhone, and it even comes with developer mode. Like you can flip a switch and you get a console. Amazing. So I've got object. That's pretty much IE6 debugging days again. It makes me feel kind of reminiscent. And the JavaScript error undefined. It's just like, I don't know, something. So I'm going to show you these live in a moment. JS console, so the first thing for just straight console logging, I use JS console, which will create a remote port it'll expose a remote port, give you a script back. I put it into my page, refresh, and the two will talk to each other. So I'll show you that as well. So this is just for JavaScript consoling, and it'll capture errors, and you can execute JavaScript straight onto the phone from your desktop. The second tool is Winery by Patrick Mueller, which is basically when it was released, I was like, oh yeah, finally we've got a DOM inspector for my mobile phone. And Winery comes with, does actually come with a console as well, a JavaScript console, so it will capture console logs. But at the moment, it doesn't capture any console logs before the two have connected, whereas JS console will. So if you refresh, if you have any kind of console logging as it's booting up, you won't see them in Winery. So that's why I'm still using the two. But these are all open source projects, so I need to speak to Patrick, which can give him a patch to fix it. I'm going to show you Adobe Shadow. So somehow Adobe actually made something that we're all quite pleased about having today, rather than back in the days. What Shadow is, it shadows your navigation, which isn't that useful, actually. I don't want to be going to Google and searching for lolcats and looking at pictures of my son, that replicating on all the phones. What it is useful for is having your local site on your machine and just keep hitting refresh on the local host. So I'll show you that as well. And the point is, it will then refresh every single device that's attached. So it doesn't give you a script debugger. It just gives you an idea of what it looks like in the first place. And part of getting the thing to work and understanding where fixing that bug is making it look right as well. Those three tools are for the actual hardware. This next tool, Web Inspector, is for the simulator. It's close to like if this was on the phone, and apparently it is on the phone. There's a full debugger API on mobile Safari, but there's a firewall stopping us from getting it because that'd be, we wouldn't want to actually be able to debug the hardware. This is my alluding to cock blocking from Apple yesterday as well. So I'm going to show you this live, and it's a full inspector as well. And the one I can't show you, but I wish I could, this is the icing on the cake. There's a piece of kit called Aardwolf. And it's a little node server that you run at your computer. And it gives you a JavaScript. It gives you the JavaScript that's running on the device. And you can add breakpoints. And you can put debugger statements in there. And you can step through the code. And you can look at the state of the different variable states. Problem is, it works perfectly for the example. When I tried to hook it up to the demo I'll show you in a minute, it didn't work. But in theory, it's fairly sound. It's fucking insane. They rewrite all your JavaScript, wrapping it in function calls, and then to get the code to pause, they do a synchronous XHR request, which causes the whole thing to hang, and then you can look at the state of the application at that point in time. Like I said, insane, but it works. Just for the demo. I'm sure it works on other ones, and I just didn't have time to kind of get it working properly. So now I'm going to go to live demo time. Okay, so the first thing is you're not even looking at my screen, right? Cool. Okay. I was going to open with that slide deck instead, but decided not to. Sorry, Brian. Okay, so JS console. So I'm running. Oh, my window's too small. I'm running all this locally, but all of this stuff is online as well. I'm running it locally to make sure that it actually works. So I've got JS console working. Excuse me while I get my phone pointing to the same computer. Right. Okay, so there's my phone. Okay, right, so I've got this game called Marbles, all right? It's not very clever, it's not making any money, but none of my stuff does anyway, so whatever. Okay, so the game is on my phone, I can play it, but maybe there's a bug, right? So I want to do some console logging. So I'm just going to do console log, A, B, C, D, E, F, and so on, and maybe capture the errors. So let's put locking on. There you go. Okay. And JS Console works on any phone, right? It's Windows Phone, Boot to Gecko. It works on all these phones. That's the point. So I'm going to do :listen. And if I do listen without a label, it will just give me kind of a random string. I'm going to give it a label of rem. It gives me a script tag back, and I'm going to drop that into my code for this page. So index.html, I've got it here. Okay, so I save. I've just got a script include that I got from JS Console. And on the phone, or in my app, at the bottom I'm going to have, you see that at the back, yeah? Yeah, it's a pretty big screen. Console.log, hello, Mobilism. Okay. So we're listening. Here's my phone. Let's hit refresh. Okay, so the first things first, since we've got remote control of this phone, and I found people accidentally putting this on their live websites, a news website in Croatia, randomly include the script. There's an alert box to tell you that you have a development tool live on this page. So make sure you remove it if you're going live, because people will just write JavaScript and it will inject straight into the phone. So I hit OK. And it doesn't work. And this is why live demos. Okay. All right, give me a moment. It will work. Okay, that's my console.log. Doesn't have the other one for some reason. Okay, and also when I touch one of these marbles, these squares, it's going to do a console.log. There's my code. Find console.log. So it's going to drop out the actual object that I touched into the console. So I've touched one, and it's hanging. Ah, come on. My whole phone's hanging now. All right, let's try that again. Yeah, my son. There you can look at him. I've killed my whole phone. Excellent. Yeah, love Apple. Backup phone. Okay, let's try that again. So, you can all see this. Okay, so there's the alert. There's the connection. Tap one of these things. Oh, script error is even better. Well, let's pretend the script errors didn't happen. But I can inject JavaScript as well. Alert. I mean, alerts aren't great, right? But they're something. Okay. Alert boxes. Son of a bitch. Right. Oh, there we go. Right. JavaScript object. I just tapped the screen. Sorry, it's distracting. OK. So JS console, but it's only a JavaScript console. It's not quite enough, in my view. It needs to be. We need to unify these tools somehow as well. So I'm going to show you Winery. So Winery you install via npm. So you download and install Node. Node comes with npm. You type npm install Winery, and you get the Winery tool. You need to bind it. You need to make sure that you're binding to your IP address that the phone is going to connect to. Okay, so in this case, I'm connecting to 10.1.192 and so on. Where are we running here? Okay, so my IP address is actually 100, so I need to bind to the right host. And now this Winery includes this script tag that I'm highlighting. I then drop that into my page. Okay, so at the bottom of this, I've got the Winery include. I'm going to stick to Android. That might be OK. OK, so reflection. So marble squared, same URL. Sorry, I should have remembered to hook up the rig. And I click on the hit refresh here. Go to the Winery's client tool. Basically, select the target, go to the element tree, and now I've got a live DOM inspector. So as I hover, or let's hit the high score thing. Okay, so I've got some high score text. Where is it? High score div. Let's open that. Let's change some text. Oh, it's completely out of focus. Hello. Yeah, I can look at the CSS. You can see that buttons are broken at the top, so I can actually go in and live edit the CSS and try and fix the CSS from within Winery. And I've got my DOM tree, basically, and that allows me to kind of mess around with the layout and fix it, hopefully. I've got these other tabs. Resources will give me the SQL database, local storage, and so on. Network doesn't work, I believe, or it's never worked for me. And I have a JavaScript console here, so I can do an alert as well. Yay. Live. So I'm injecting JavaScript on the fly as well. Like I said, I found that the console logs that were happening during the script's boot time. So you can see there's no, like the console log for the application is ready. It wasn't there. Should also do, if I tap one of these, it should post that to the console. No? OK. OK, so the last one is Shadow. And Shadow's available on Android and iPhone. So you're scrolling there. So I install the Android and iPhone app on my phone. I install the Shadow program on my PC, my Windows or Mac, and then I install a Chrome plugin. So there's like 3 install processes. It's free in that it's free to download. It's not free as in open source. So I open up Shadow, and I'm presented with this screen where it's trying to connect to my phone. It's now connected, and anywhere I navigate on my desktop, oh, because there was an alert there. Anywhere I navigate on my desktop is then reflected on my phone as well. And I can have multiple devices connected. So you can connect your iPad as well if that's what you're testing. So where were we? Let's go to Marble Squared. So you can see my phone in the background is now switching to Marble Squared. The point is not for it to follow your navigation. For me, it's not. Like both these phones are both following the URL that I'm on my desktop. It's so that I can keep hitting refresh on my desktop as I make bug fixes. Okay, and I've used this in combined with JS Console so that it then connects and then logs out what's going on, so that I'm not having to kind of keep going back to the phone and hitting refresh and just fiddling when I don't want to. I just want to, type and go basically. So that's Shadow, and the last one is iWeb Inspector. Yep. It does. So yeah, it was down 2 days ago. That's the problem. Shadow it doesn't have it in it. So from Shadow you can go and was it here? Click on the plugin. Open. That's my phone. Well, there are a lot of iPhones, right? And I couldn't work out which one was mine, so I changed the name. There's the remote inspection. So you hit this link, and then opens up Winery for that phone. I've no idea what's going to happen if I've got two phones connected at once. Oh, no. So, yeah, I just chose my iPhone. This is what Winery looks like when Adobe are hosting it. Oh, no, that's not true. That's unfair. Actually, I don't have an internet connection. But when I was doing my workshop, they were down. But Winery, you can use it as a bookmarklet as well, so you can inject it into any page as well. So you could be on your phone, add it to your bookmarks in the browser, and then inject in. The other thing to be wary of is Shadow is using a WebKit view, which means that on the iPhone, it's using the WebKit view page, or whatever the object's called. It's not Mobile Safari. It's almost Mobile Safari, but it's not quite. And in particular, I've got an Android 4 here with Chrome and, was it Android browser? Is that actually the name? Just browser, right. This is using WebKit from the browser and not Chrome, and if they lose like Android browser, you need to be wary that you're looking at just one particular instance of WebKit, right? It's going to be different in the different phones there. Okay, so the iOS simulator. So I've opened up Marble Squared again, and there's this piece of software by, I can't remember his full name, but Fert on Twitter. And I hit load from Safari. I haven't done anything here, nothing special here. I've just got the new simulator, and I've said load from Safari, but I can also do load from web app, as in a saved app on my home screen, or I can load from a PhoneGap app as well. So I can give it actually put in the name of the application, load, and I'll be able to inspect it. So, I can't resize it, can I? So I select the page that I'm interested in debugging. I can't make it any more narrow, though. That's the only thing. So you can see in the background, I'm hovering over, and you can see it's selecting different, it's highlighting different elements. So I've hit the high scores. You can see me over on the high scores. I've changed that to yay simulators. That spells it wrong, but okay. So updating that in real time. But what this has as well is I have the scripts tab. So I can actually go and put breakpoints in here. So let's find touch. Where are we showing the thing? So high scores. Right. Oh, there's a breakpoint already. So if I hit high scores, code is paused. I can open up the console. I can look at event. I can inspect it. I've got watches that I can add. I can look at the full scope. I've got JavaScript step debugging. But again, it's a simulator. This remote debugging protocol is on the phone, but has a firewall stopping us from getting to it. So, I want to show you real mobile phone debugging, and it will be on that shaky camera rig that I've made up. So Chrome for Android has its inspector in there. You have to do some funky command line magic, but it does work. Let me just get my cable. So if I plug my phone in, okay, which I guess is fine. I have to go through a whole bunch of, tick several boxes for USB debugging. Open up, I'm going to open up Chrome on my phone. I know you can't see what I'm doing at the moment, but open up Chrome on my phone. And if I get the SDK tools, I can list the devices. So I have a device attached. And then I just pull up this command that's really memorable. And now my laptop and my phone are still talking to each other. So if I go back to reflection, that's still talking. Cool. So lo-fi camera. Okay, so on my phone, on my desktop, I go to localhost port 9300. Sorry, 9222. Okay, it lists out the number of tabs that are open. I've got marbles open, so I'm going to select marbles here. Oh, you can't see that, can you? I select marbles here, and at this point, my demo stops working. For some reason, the DevTools on Chrome needs to have an internet connection, so you can't debug offline. But what I end up having, I'm going to cheat and just show you. Basically, you've got the full DevTools and the very, very up-to-date DevTools where you have all the network requests, live, I think there's live JavaScript editing in there, or I assume it will be pretty soon because it's the same piece of kit. Network requests, script tags, breakpoints, timelines. And the other really nice thing is you can drop, you can do like capture the memory usage going on the phone. I'm not pro enough to actually understand all the data that's there, but you can actually have a look at what's going on the phone, and if it's running out of memory because your app's kind of constantly running, you'll get some indication from that. And there's actually a surprising number of devices that have support for remote debugging. The BlackBerry Playbook, I can't remember when it was released, a year ago or a couple of years ago now. All you do is you like tick a couple of boxes, and you just connect to that device on port 1337, and you get the full debugging tools for any page you're browsing. This is the way that I think it should work. It should just open up a port, and it has a privacy mode and make sure. I think it disables it by default after a while, or you have to keep turning it on. But it means that I can connect wirelessly to the playbook and actually get the dev tools for the website I'm on. I want to see the rest of the phone supporting this. Andreas mentioned Dragonfly, which is Opera's debugging kit. It runs on port 7001. You have to tick lots of boxes and tick boxes on the phone, get them to talk to each other. I know he also mentioned that they're going to make that much simpler. But there's full debugging tools on Opera Mobile as well. And Firefox, I haven't had a chance to personally test this yet, and apparently there's a patch coming for Firefox Mobile, which you go through the same process that I do for Chrome for Android, and it runs on port 8000. I run that little command line, and it will allow me to browse to the developer tools for that web page that I'm on. What about iOS? I've had kind of, maybe I should show this slide. I don't know whether or not I should or not. But I was talking to Patrick, the guy who wrote Winery, and talking about kind of step debugging and how we can do that. And he mentioned some tweet where a guy said, yay, remote debugging in a version of Safari that I haven't seen. And this is why I want the Apple DevRels to talk to us, because we need these tools. And I want them on the actual piece of hardware. And this suggests that it might be in there in the future. Maybe not, I don't know. The other thing we can do is build our own tools. We can fix the areas. Like JS Console is a tool that I wrote to fix problems. Winery was a tool that Patrick wrote to actually get that DOM tree there. We can write our own tools to test for event handlers and different performance metrics, emulate different APIs. Ripple is a good example of this, where they're emulating all the APIs for your code to like pick up and actually test without having to go to the actual go to the phone. Remote tilt is a small example of that. So I wanted to test orientation events. But it's hard because you actually, the gyroscope's on the device, or MacBook Pros, but I don't have a MacBook Pro. So I wrote a piece of code that just opens a pop-up, and you have a phone, and you move it around, and it sends events directly to the page. So you can pretend, or you can emulate the orientation events, which makes debugging much, much easier, because you're not kind of changing code and refreshing on the phone and trying to get that data back out. You can see it on your desktop. And if I have time, I might be able to demo a tool that I'm trying to work on, but at the end. So those are the tools, some of the tools. There's no one unified tool yet. I want to see something that brings all these bits together, like JS Console and Winery and the Aardwolf, the step debugging. I want to see them all in one tool. But the last part of my kind of debugging process is expect the unexpected in that. I wrote a demo for a talk I was giving, and I had exactly the same code, and I sat there with my colleague, and he was refreshing, and it was completely broken on his phone, and I was refreshing, and it was perfect on my phone. And it was exactly the same. Everything was identical, and iPhone, they were exactly the same. Turned out, he was on the 3G connection, and I was on the Wi-Fi. That was the only difference, so there had to be something that was different. It turned out that he was on 3G, and in the UK we have O2, and they took this line of code and munched it up and spat it out completely differently. So the gateways that we're connecting to when we're going over 3G, they're doing a bit of optimization to compress the images. They're doing some proxying for us, because in O2's case, they compress images. You get a slightly kind of you get a slightly less data over the wire, which is good for us with our data plans, but it's not so good if they also compress JavaScript and their compressors have bugs in them. And it was then compressing this and destroying it. So the point being is that's still a difference. We're still trying to replicate the environment. So to test this and confirm the bug, we then tethered our laptops to the phone, emulated the user agent string to tell the server that we're connecting to that I am a phone. And the other thing that you can, well, in O2's case, I'm not sure about other network providers, but you can bypass these gateways. And if they have these proxies, there must be a way of bypassing them. It's not to get around the problem, but it's to confirm the problem really exists. So we create these test cases, and we want to confirm it genuinely exists, and this is one way we could bypass that gateway, and if it does work, then the bug exists in the network. This was a project I did a couple of years ago. I had to release on an iPod 2.2, and it was almost live. It was very close to release, and the client phoned up and said, yeah, the iPod is crashing. Something in your HTML, CSS, or JavaScript is causing the phone to crash, the entire thing. And the only way that I could debug that was doing a 50-50 debugging, which is the worst kind of debugging. It's the slowest kind, where you take all your code, you slice it in half, and the half that works is not the one with a bug in, right? And you keep going down until your phone crashes, which takes ages to reboot. It turned out to be CSS, like a negative 9,000 text indent, whatever. But this is my last resort debugging. If I'm able to replicate the bug but can't get inside of it using these tools, this is my last resort. Other things that we need to do is emulate the actual network connections. There are tools to do this as well, to slow down the connection, to emulate like 3G connections, edge connections, and so on. There's some tools that come with Xcode. There's some alternatives for Windows. There's Sloppy for Windows. The link is there, so you don't have to Google that. And this will take your network connection down to something like 3G or down to real slow. So you've got an idea of maybe the JavaScript's not coming down quickly enough and causing some bug, basically. So we want to replicate the entire environment. And the other thing is be careful about this. So testing, we were testing an application. And we had a bug. We put console logs into our code, and we're using JS Console to remote get those consoles back out. And we couldn't work out what was wrong. The Android was fine, but the Windows Phone wasn't. And it turns out, when we put JS Console into the Windows Phone, Windows now has a console object. When you take it out, Windows does not have a console object. So our console.log was the thing that was causing the bug. So just be wary of the tools that we're injecting in there as well. So I'm kind of closing this bit on not a perfect quote, but the point being is, we're investigating these puzzles. We're Sherlock Holmes. And I like this idea of eliminating the impossible and then finding the solution. The other last thing for debugging, take a break. Go for a walk away from the problem. You go to the toilet, maybe do both, toilet and walk. All the great ideas come when you're in the shower, right? So just walk away from the problem. We need to demand more from the browser vendors. We need to demand that we have these debugging tools. We need to get Apple to start talking back to us somehow. I want to see desktop quality tools available to debug mobile phones. I think that we can build this ourselves. We shouldn't have to, but we could do. I think that maybe we could normalize all the different protocols that the debugging tools are using. So Dragonfly has one protocol. Android has another one. I think Firefox are now picking up that same Google debugging API. Maybe we can actually normalize that ourselves and have one tool that can debug these different platforms. I've got a few minutes. I'm not going to do a live demo. I'm going to show you a video of what I mean. I think we can do some of these techniques and put them all together. Something I've been working on is not quite like Shadow, but I want to be able to write code live on my phone, and I want it to refresh on every single browser that I have pointing to it. So this is a video of me writing code on my desktop and it injecting live on all these different devices. Windows Phone, Boot to Gecko, iPhone, iPad, Android. Doesn't matter if it's Chrome or Android browser, but I'm changing the CSS on my desktop, and it's affecting all of these phones in real time. This is for test cases and debugging small pieces of code. This is not for developing entire websites. This will be live in a few weeks, but we just got it working last week, so it's a little bit too beta. My big plan was to run it here and everyone connect and watch my laptop go up into flames, but I thought maybe not. Yeah, that's jsbin.com/3, and it'll be available. But I want to see. I think that I can take this tool a bit further and add step debugging inside of it as well. So that's everything I've got to say. Oh, Jason didn't like this picture, so he asked me to change it. I haven't got any more time, so I'm sure you want to go to lunch if you can take your eyes away from the screen. Thank you. Come ask me questions during lunch if you want to.